we are recording, and this is the wonderful opportunity to talk to you today about one of our favorite topics: multimedia localization, audiovisual technology, audiovisual translation. And with this topic, we are starting the Nimdzi language technology series. I hope you guys can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So this event, this panel discussion is being held on December 2, 2020. And we are recording it for the localization industry to witness. I'm super happy to announce actually three speakers, amazing gurus of this audiovisual translation and technology area that we have today. And my name is Yulia Akhulkova. I'm working as the lead technology researcher at Nimdzi Insights. Nimdzi is the research and consultancy company. And we are, again, as I mentioned, really excited about today's event. We are having two guests, Greg and Mazin, but let's start with Belén. In alphabetical order, you see, Belén, Greg, and Mazin. So Belén here is our eLearning director and lead media researcher from Nimdzi Insights, same as myself. Then we have Greg from Deluxe Entertainment Services Group. Greg is Vice President, Product Development and Innovation are also topics of his main area of work. And finally, last but not least, we have Mazin, who said we can call him just Maz, Al-Jamaili from ZOO Digital, who is the Director of Business Development. That's our amazing panelists. And we are definitely going to like what we're going to discuss today. We will start with comments of our wonderful audience on the challenges of, well, you may see it on the screen, of joining such different things and very demanding, I would say, things of scripting, translation, glossaries, recording, quality control in one hosted online space for the purposes of the dubbing. So let's maybe start with Mads. How is that? Would you like to start?
Hey, how are you? Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Belén. And hi, Gregory. Just a bit of some backdated sort of information about ZOO and how we sort of built our remote dubbing system. We'd already built about 7 or 8 years ago a subtitling system, a cloud-based subtitling system, and deployed that to a sort of freelance workforce with a lot of the similar kind of functionality to the sort of dubbing elements. And this is, Greg will attest to this. This is what we've done across businesses that, that have built these sort of cloud-based subtitling and dubbing platforms. So there's nothing particularly kind of new about the parts that we're going to discuss now about scripting and translation and glossary, really, because they are almost identical kind of frameworks to subtitling translation. So what is more refined for dubbing translation user interfaces that we sort of developed is dubbing and subtitling sort of are different different elements to the same sort of translation process. The dubbing translation is far different from a subtitle translation, so we had to adapt our user interface to accommodate a more direct kind of dubbing adaptation interface that was familiar to dubbing translators to begin with. So we built this whole sort of end-to-end system that incorporated scripting and then adaptation, and then sort of pushed the adaptation into the recording interface. And that is something that I think to join the end-to-end sort of process for translation, which is the first part and more critical part of the dubbing process, we concentrated a lot of effort on building that sort of user interface for the end user. And then really sort of working that into how do we then sort of build a good recording interface. And Greg can attest to this. We're all in a very similar space when meeting the challenges of building a remote recording interface with quite high standards that we have to meet to match a dubbing studio. interface. So we replicate it as much as possible. We've emulated as much as possible a recording interface that really is, again, another familiar space that an engineer can work with, a director can work with, multiple actors can work with, and we're trying to build that familiar space to make it less intimidating for them to work in a creative environment. And then the QC, controls built around all of those components, whether it be scripting, translating, in glossarization, and the recording functionality. All of those parts have a very, very strict quality control adherence around them. So, case in point, if you have an actor that hasn't got an environment that they can effectively record in, and that the quality expectation of that recording is just not good enough, we won't let them record. So, and the same goes for any of our translation process. We have multiple translators and adapters QCing each other's material, the same as we do in a subtitling world. So all of these parts really are, the dubbing interface is built for the creative process to be more streamlined. And we're not trying to sort of cut corners here. We're trying to give almost like a playground for the creative process to work in a more efficient manner.
Very good intro, thank you. So for those of our listeners who are not very well familiar with your solutions, which are helping with joining all of these different things in one hosted online space, would you say like the names like Zoodubs, I suppose, correct? Also, yeah, you mentioned subtitles, so it would be Zoodubs, I think. So just so that we're clear on that one.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So we've built Zoodubs, ZOO scripts, ZOO subs. See where this is going. So ultimately, all of those components actually link together, and we've got like an overarching kind of workflow management system that connects all the dots between all of the components, starting with scripting. So we build a script manager. We can reassess versions of scripts that then get pushed into templates, that then gets pushed into a subtitling workflow and then into a dubbing workflow. And then the magic of that is if you get a new version of something, you can reassess that script that then re-pushes a new version into the subtitling workflow and the dubbing workflow. So we're trying to build something that accommodates not just dubbing, translation and dubbing recording. We're actually, we all get given, Greg and I and other businesses get given multiple subtitle and dubbing projects to do in multiple languages. So we're trying to fulfill that worldwide expectation of multiple languages. So rather than just a single language delivery. So all of the parts that we build are trying to talk to each other, or will do talk to each other. And the magic of it is trying to sort of connect them all so that everyone worldwide can see where we are and can see every component and its status at any given point.
Thank you. And before we switch to Greg to comment on the same and to continue this interesting topic, I maybe would like to have another clearance on the subject of like Zoodubs in particular. When I started working at Nimdzi 2.5 years ago, I was just jumping into the multimedia localization technology, and I wrote something about Zoodubs back then, already fascinated by the capabilities of online recording, and I was wondering how your solution developed through the years, and in particular through the last year and the challenges the pandemic brought on us.
Yeah, so going back, we launched this nearly 4 years ago now as a kind of as a solution that we would use as a business to manage dubbing, voiceover services, ADR, audio description, etc. So it has generally, as any piece of software does, and our subtitling software 8 years down the line is still being updated with various things. Our dubbing software has gone through the same kind of arc of recreation. So it definitely is it's in a different space to the 2.5 years ago when you saw it. We've enhanced it with really the input from the creative community, and that is the most important, because they're the most important people that we need to satisfy in order to make them comfortable to use the system. So we've introduced over the last year, and it's been not necessarily driven by the pandemic, but that has sort of accelerated some of the need for this. But we've built in all the components that again would replicate a sort of remote virtual dubbing space. So being able to have multiple actors online at the same time, being able to have an engineer and a director in a kind of in a situation like this, do we have multiple face-to-face kind of collaboration online during a session? Having and we released it only a couple of weeks ago, actually, a group recording function, so we could have multiple actors in multiple locations within the same scene recording at the same time, controlled by an engineer and director, and they could be in a studio or some remotely. And also multiple mic recording. So if you had, in some cases, you might have actors 4 in the same room with their own individual microphones, you could actually assign them a microphone during that recording session independently. So all of these parts were sort of building to kind of accommodate and replicate almost like a global kind of bespoke. Some of these are going to be very bespoke sort of processes in each territory. Some people dub in a very different manner to others. So we need to kind of build a sort of smart suite of the user interface to be able to satisfy each sort of territory need. The pandemic, it did sort of bring certainly remote dubbing to the forefront in March, and that was everyone, all of us, you know, Greg, I, other businesses were approached, and we sort of put in some business continuity measures with dubbing studios and content holders alike, and we tried to sort of offer up all of us, you know, just basically a solution, you know, that could be quickly sort of fired up, that would accommodate, you know, safety measures, you know, making sure that people were working within a safe environment.
Yeah, indeed. And thank you for these comments. And with that, I would like to pass the mic to Greg for him to share their journey at Deluxe on the same question and the technology they introduced and developed in the recent years and months.
Yeah, well, very similar to Maz and ZOO. Deluxe has been working with a remote workforce for, well, we've been working with a remote workforce for about 20 years now. With the acquisition of Sfera started and had pretty much a very similar trajectory to ZOO. But, you know, we already had, I wouldn't say that there was a challenge of joining all of these things together, because we already had it all joined together. You know, scripting, translation, integrated glossaries, QC, all of these things were all already part of an integrated supply chain system, Sfera, that did all of those tasks. I think the where we differ from ZOO is that rather than building, you know, taking the translation app and then building a recording app from there, we started from scratch and built a recording app specifically for engineers and for actors and directors. You know, taking what was done in the translation app and then bringing it into a completely new interface built from the ground up. And I think that the challenges really have been about adoption. You know, to be honest, I think a lot of dubbing studios, especially in some of the larger territories that have been working on dubbing for 50 years, they're apprehensive to change, which is understandable. And I think a lot of the challenges have been even kind of getting a chance of beyond looking at the tools as something that's more than just, oh, well, this is okay for a pickup line here and there. But the trajectory has been really amazing. You know, we've recorded now a number of shows that have been 100% recorded remotely, not a single line recorded in studio, that are up on different streaming platforms with high quality audio and clients that are very happy with the results. So the challenge, I think, is more in adoption. Obviously, for the wrong reasons, that adoption has spiked considerably in 2020. Again, for all the wrong reasons. But the challenge really has been having dubbing studios feel comfortable with the idea that that the job can be done remotely. And it can't always be done remotely. There are some actors, there will always be a need for in studio. The way that we look at the tool is it's an extra paintbrush in the tool belt. Well, that doesn't make sense. It's an extra paintbrush in the artist's kit. So if a dubbing studio needs to use it for security purposes, or for remote recording, or to expand their footprint without spending a lot on infrastructure, it's there. So I think as that light bulb starting to pop up in different people's heads around the world, the adoption is definitely getting easier. And like ZOO, it's all a interconnected system. So once the script is completed and it's going into a QA or an approval from a client, all the email notifications are automated. There's a lot of scheduling tools and a lot of bells and whistles that help make the job easier and make sure that everybody's on the same page at the same time. But I would say the challenge has been adoption, and it is. I think that really the hardest part was in March, April, when actors were getting set up with microphones and not really sure, and maybe in some cases some recordings maybe didn't sound as good as they could have, or I think the important bit when it comes to quality is that everybody's on the same page and everybody knows what they're listening to and what they're seeing, and that's really what we've been focusing on, is replicating the in-studio experience, so that the director and the actor really just sit back and focus on their job and don't have to worry about what's this new software. And the engineer is working in something that is familiar to them and can control a session and have complete control of the quality, the sync, and so on and so forth.
Well, I couldn't agree more. We have been hearing similar discussions here and there in the industry, and the question of adoption is also worth talking about from not only the studio's perspective per se, but also freelancer engagement, I think, and UI challenges, which I think Maz mentioned in our preparation to this conversation today. So what have changed? You, Greg, mentioned the most critical point in time with the switching from the regular to the online format. So like in March, April, do you see better involvement and adoption and engagement of the actual talents nowadays, and how are they also adopting to the technology and this new software, which you also mentioned? And actually, Belén, if you can comment on that as well, please join us.
Absolutely. Should I start or?
Sure.
So, yeah, now that we're a little further along the way, user engagement is really tremendous. We've had a lot of feedback. We've made a lot of changes, and the system, I mean, honestly, we have new releases every 3 weeks, and every 3 weeks we're releasing pretty major features. Even since the last time I showed you, Belén and Yulia, we have more changes that I'd be excited to show you again. But the engagement has really been tremendous, and now it's at a point where users are logging in. You start recording within a few minutes. We're now at a point where we're taking the amount of time in studio versus remote recording is almost, there's almost no difference at this point. And even with new users that have never used it before, or recently we worked on a tentpole title, not for dubbing, but for ADR. And I logged into the session maybe about 30 minutes into it. I wasn't running the session. The sound supervisor's regular ADR recordist was using it. And I logged in at about 30 minutes in, and I was expecting them to still maybe be working through some issues, but they were already on reel 3. They'd gone through 3 reels already in just a few minutes. So it's really, the engagement's really tremendous. The UI challenges are, you know, I think that the biggest challenge in UI is fitting all of the features that are needed into a compact space, because, you know, our tool and ZOO's tool as well, they're both web-based. So you have a web browser open and that's your canvas. So fitting all of the needs into a compact space is really challenging, and without making it overbearing, overcomplicated, and still easy for people to understand. The thing that I love about OneDub is an engineer can open it, have never seen it before, never gotten any training, and understand how to use it almost instantly. So that's really what we want to keep there, so that when they have the idea, oh, I want to mute everybody's channels, or, you know, I want to change the volume for this for this track for everybody, or anything that they want to do, that it's instinctive and that they don't have to look for it and learn how to do it. So the UI challenges, they're really fun to work on, to be honest, but they're there, and it is about having one window to work with, and that window having the need to be able to edit script, record audio, playback video, and do other things as well.
Well, I would like to know if Maz experience and his team's experience has also been fun in this area, same as Greg described.
Yeah, the UI experience is quite interesting. I mean, Greg just described the engineers sort of UI experience, and engineers, as he says, pick it up very, very quickly. Whatever sort of system they're using, they pick that up very, very quickly. So we think that, you know, there's about 3 layers of UI kind of experience that we have, or 4 layers. So you've got your translator experience and the adapter, and being able to utilize the adaptation and sort of time text sort of elements of it. That usually sort of is very quickly sort of managed, but from a user experience, from an adapter's experience. Next is engineer, because they have to set up the actors, they have to set up the studio environment, they have to set up making sure microphones are at certain levels, etc. That's something from a technical point of view people grasp very, very quickly. So the creative, so it's where the real challenges come are, as Greg alluded to, you don't get all actors who are able to basically become a bit more tech savvy than they used to be. Actors are used to walking into a studio and basically not having to do anything other than act and interact with their director. They are there to do a job, and their job is to concentrate on what they're paid to do. And the same with the director. They don't want to have to kind of look at the technical parameters and make sure they, you know, have certain technical elements set up in their environment. That is what they're used to do. So we as sort of engineers and engineering sort of businesses need to provide that UI to be almost like as Greg says, walk in and you just start recording. It's that simple. That's our goal to do that. Some of the challenges were re-engineering our UI to basically accommodate for those 3 or 4 different engagements within the system. So we still have, and you know, we will always have, not necessarily resistance, but somewhat fear, stroke resistance, stroke inability to manage remote dubbing as an actor, because actors go to a studio to record. They're not naturally recording from home or from another recordable environment. So that's something that's new to them. That's something that, you know, we all have a challenge, whether it be dubbing studio, whether it be us as sort of global vendors that are trying to integrate remote dubbing services. That's almost like a PR exercise that we need to kind of do to build that confidence with the acting community. And we all know that some actors will just never be able to, you know, or don't have the ability to change the way that they work. So we need to accommodate for both. And then director as well. The director needs to have the shortest kind of, you know, startup within a session without having, again, to deal with, you know, switching on a web-based application, making sure something works. Is their microphone working? Can they see the video? Is the video working? They need it to be as smooth as possible. And in order to win in this game, in order to sort of gain confidence with that whole creative community, we as engineers need to make it as seamless as possible. And the less button presses and the less kind of onboarding process that we present to a user, that's where we will sort of, it will become a much more natural go-to to become a, to use remote dubbing services.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And really our goal is that the engineer, that the actor and the director, they just show up to the session. They click a link, they're in the session, and no other buttons need to be pressed. And that's pretty much where we're at today. We're working on a few minor adjustments to make things even easier, but I think that that's the goal, for Maz as well. Like he said, it's not the actor's job to set anything up, to control anything. And that's, even that's not only is it our opinion, but it is also, unions in France, Spain, Italy, Germany. That's a very important point to them, that the actor's job isn't to touch anything and to tinker with software or anything like that. So really our goal is click the link, receive an email, click the link, and you're in the session and you're ready to record, with the exception of setting up your microphone, which is now, to be honest, really easy with some of the high quality USB mics that are available.
Yeah, actually, that was also my point. It's not on the slide, but about the, we talked about, no, you talked about UI challenges, but we didn't touch yet until this very moment the so-called hardware challenges. And the thing is that, for example, for a Russian dubbing industry, and it's huge in Russia because we have this law to dub every content which we stream online or in theaters, which are actually not closed in Russia. Even now, you can go to the movie theater and see a movie there currently. So the point is that the good microphone, the USB microphone, is not cheap. But that is not the point of the discussion today. I was just, following your leads, gentlemen, and imagining a person, a talent, an actor, logging into the session, and then the quality of the sound would actually depend very much on the setup he or she has at home. And that's also a point to discuss, but maybe not today. However, today we're going to switch to Belén now. For her to kind of sum up what she had found in addition to what Greg and Maz mentioned. And I will hide my screen now for Belén to present her findings on the very same topics, actually.
Thank you so much, Julia. And just to add to the previous point, I wanted to comment very briefly before I start talking about this specific report. But I was lucky enough to talk to some representatives from the artistic community about this topic, and that's included in the remote recording report. I talked to Valeria Zunzun. She is a director and voice actress with a boutique studio in Los Angeles. And I'm glad that it took me so long to write this report, because things have changed so much from March until now. So thanks to my delay in writing the report, I could update it, and priorities in the artistic community has changed, I would say. Because at the beginning, I remember when I talked to Valeria, and thank you, Valeria, if you're listening, for your contribution. She had some concerns about remote recording, for example, about latency, like if the internet connection is not good or the platform is slow, that will have a huge impact for lip sync, because every millisecond matters. So that was a concern for her. Of course, quality was a concern as well. If people were recording with bad microphones or with a not nice environment for sound, that was also a concern. And another thing that she was telling me is like when she's directing, she would like to see the face of the actor or actress to see if they are frustrated, if they are happy, if they are tired, because that helps, the body language helps her to give better direction. So that's what Valeria said that in March. But after she's been directing for 5 months, that changed a little bit. Yeah, nice microphone, Yulia. Product placement there, by the way. But so after that, I talked to Valeria again, and she was like, okay, latency was not such a big deal after all. So things were working pretty well. It was possible to do that. And she told me that seeing the faces of people was not that necessary after all, because people, where they are home, they are not super dressed up or things like that, that they don't want to show their screen. And at the same time, showing the video takes some bandwidth from the internet, so that may have an impact on the session. So these things were changing, and she was very comfortable recording remotely. Of course, she has a professional studio, so it's a different setup from other people who are not used to record from home. But I think that's a good feedback on how people are evolving. And actually, she also told me that some actors in Los Angeles now, they enjoy recording from home because they don't have to drive through Los Angeles, which is a huge city, and then they have to commute and they waste a lot of time. So people are starting to see the positive things, even if the artistic community were a bit reluctant at the beginning. But anyway, sorry.
I was
yes,
going to say, I think actors in Los Angeles prefer it because of that. Because previously, you know, if they're driving in LA, it takes an hour to get anywhere. If they're driving from job to job, from studio to studio, they only have a certain amount of hours in the day to record. And now most of the actors I know in Los Angeles, you know, they finish one session, they click a button, and they're in their next session. So they're actually making more. They're actually making more money recording remotely, because they're able to take on one or two more jobs in a day than they normally would, which is kind of amazing. Yeah.
And we have the same issues really for transportation around Europe. You know, we've noticed that, you know, you got Berlin, Paris, even London. There's public transport. You know, you have to get to the center of cities on public transport, which people are very nervous about taking now, and they don't want to. And that's not going to go away for a little while, that nervousness. So having that extra ability and an avenue of earning money, again, you know, as a voice artist, you want to earn money, and we're just keeping that open as an option, you know, and we're widening their ability to work, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah, I think they are starting to realize the benefits of doing this. Okay, so now I will go and present the remote recording report that Mas and Greg wonderfully contributed to it with demos and with interviews and with everything. So thank you so much for that. The title is Work in Progress. I'm working with the marketing team, but it will be something like that: Remote Recording for the Media Industry, the Ultimate Guide, and it will be available next month. So I just wanted to introduce very briefly the methodology for the report. So the main goal of this report, and the reason why I started this research, was to analyze how the lockdowns were impacting the media industry, specifically in the dubbing landscape. Because of course, something happened there. Sorry. Okay. Because of course, subtitling, it's business as usual because it's done remotely anyway. So the impact in the subtitling part was very small, but for the dubbing industry was really what has had a huge impact. So I wanted to analyze that. I wanted to understand the challenges of the different stakeholders: content distributors, media companies, and voice talent community. And I wanted to analyze the different solutions that were out there in the market. So basically, I talked to content distributors. I talked to media localization companies, including Deluxe, Agulló Media Group, SDA Media, SoundMap, and ZOO Digital. And I talked to the voice talent community. The solutions that are included in this report are these ones here, basically because those were the ones that I came across while interviewing the different stakeholders. So the first one is Session Link Pro. It was a tool that was available already in the market. before the pandemic, and it's used for recording. And this solution was put in place by SDA Media and SoundMap, which is a game localization studio in Mexico. Then we analyzed Deluxe One Dub, of course, developed by Deluxe. We analyzed Zoodubs, developed by ZOO Digital, and iDub, disaster recovery system for the dubbing industry, developed by Agulló Media Group. So all these different solutions are analyzed and described in the report. This is just an overview of the content of the report. So we have several topics: dubbing or subtitling, what's the process for dubbing, the disruptions and challenges of the different stakeholders that we interviewed. So you have the context for what was going on and the priorities of the different stakeholders. We described all the different solutions put in place, and then we talked about applications beyond COVID, applications after the pandemic, which of course that was already obvious for companies such as ZOO Digital and Deluxe, because they were already creating they already had these solutions put in place, but it was not so obvious for other audiences that this can actually be a lasting solution. And due to the pandemic, that thought was more accepted, and the adoption was accelerated in a way. So that's something good out of this tremendous year that we had. So the main takeaways of the reports, the first thing that I learned talking to the different people is that even if the technology, of course, is important, because if you don't have a solid and good technology, then you cannot do this. But the most important thing was the human factor. Why? Because as Greg said before, adoption was one of the main challenges. So convincing the different stakeholders that this can actually work, convincing the content distributors that this can actually work, that they will deliver the accepted and good quality that they are looking for, that the actors can use this and this won't have a negative impact on the industry, and so on and so forth. That was the essential, that was fundamental for this technology to be widely adopted. So that was the main conclusion that I draw from this. Again, I know it's a wrong approach to say that remote dubbing may be a bad thing, and that's not what I think, but that was the impression that content distributors and artistic community had at the beginning when I started talking to them. And I think after this year, this is clearly that's been proven that remote dubbing works, and it works if it's done properly by professionals and with the right approach. And actually, it can have advantages for the artistic community and for the content distributors as well. So the main takeaways from the report would be the following. First of all, that quality and security were the main concerns for the content distributors. That's something that we already know. And by the way, I wanted to comment, because I forgot before, that from all of these solutions that I mentioned that are included in the report, I don't know if you know, but Netflix has like a guidelines or playbook for remote recording, specifying what you have to do or giving some guidelines to do this. And I want to say that both Zoodubs and Deluxe One Dub are included in that playbook. That doesn't mean that Netflix is endorsing their tools, because they clearly state that at the beginning. But in a way, they are promoting that, and I think that's the most the highest validation you can get, in a way, that Netflix has tried your tools and they are included them in the playbook. So I just wanted to say that, and yeah, I think that both tools are pretty amazing, and that's reflected there on the Netflix guidelines. So, but still on the Netflix guidelines, they said, we know that with remote recording, the quality may not be as good as in a studio, but that's how it is at the moment, and so on and so forth. So this is a clear concern by content distributors, and security as well. Another thing is that some people may think, well, maybe we can use subtitling while we cannot dub. Well, sorry, but no, this doesn't work like that. the user experience will be very negatively impacted by that, and we cannot afford to just go and subtitle stuff. Enabling collaboration between the creative team is the cornerstone of remote recording. That's already been tackled by Greg and Mas, I think, when they describe their solutions. That's the most important thing. A user-centered approach is the way to go, and I think the users for this would be the engineers and the actors, because they are, well, and artistic directors, because they are the main users of the tool. So I think developing a tool that is validated by them and fed by their feedback, it's something that it's really important to get the buy-in at the end from the end users. Then, of course, empathy and understanding is key to move forward during uncertain times, because at the beginning, actors were like, whoa, what's this? Now I need to buy a microphone, or they will send me a microphone, or they are asking me to buy a license or buy a super expensive microphone, and I haven't worked for 2 weeks and I don't have the money to buy this, and so on and so forth. So it's really a process of change management, right? And it couldn't be done properly, the change management process, because it was all of a sudden we had a pandemic and you cannot go to the studios. So there was not a smooth process, and at the beginning, empathy and collaboration with the artistic community was very important. And of course, remote dubbing has lasting innovative applications beyond COVID. I know this is obvious for companies like Deluxe and ZOO Digital, because they built these solutions before the pandemic. But I think we've already heard very positive feedback, like hybrid solutions. For example, recording in a studio, but the artistic director being remote, for example, or using this as Deluxe intended to use this tool to increase capacity. For example, to instead of building more and more recording studios, which can be challenging, use this to increase capacity. Mas also commented to me to use this as a way to elevate the industry through a proper education. So using remote recording tools to teach the professionals of the future, because this industry has been very closed in a way from an educational perspective. And thanks to this tool, you can emulate how it is to be in a studio and how to train adaptators or translators or other key roles in this industry. So there are many ways to use this technology, I would say. And yeah, and we can record from home. I just want to give a last example, but I need to say this. The other day I watched on Disney Plus the Taylor Swift documentary, where she showed how she recorded her album during the pandemic, her new album, Folklore. Well, Taylor Swift is an American singer, for those who don't know her. And she recorded part of it from home, from her bedroom. And she didn't have a huge soundproof tool or any room or anything. She just had like a small structure with some soundproof material. Of course, a super expensive microphone, because she's Taylor Swift. And she had a sound engineer in another room close to her bedroom. But she was able to produce and record an album remotely. So if Taylor Swift can record an album remotely and have a duet with Bon Iver's recording from home as well, and create an album that is super high quality, we can record remotely. And that's my contribution. Thank you.
It's a great point, and it's true that most music recording these days is done in home studios. I think more than 80% of albums that we listen to, the artists have their home studio. They plug in, they record their vocals, keyboards, whatever else they record from home. And this isn't a COVID thing. This has been the case for 10 years now. So it's definitely possible. Not possible. It's definitely possible to get a high quality recording from home. And when it comes to dubbing, this is more or less brand new, this remote recording. Really, ZOO and Deluxe have been doing it internally for ourselves for a few years now, but it's really hit the main stage this year. And I think that we've already proven that quality can be delivered at a level that's imperceptible to audiences in terms of a difference in quality. You know, maybe if you put it up to an audio engineer or a mixer and ask them, you know, to choose differences, then maybe that's a different story. But to audiences, I think that the quality difference is completely imperceptible, and it's only going to get better as time goes on. This is really a few months old at this point, so it's really great to look forward to.
And I think one of the things that we all need to be mindful of as localization vendors is there's more content that needs to be dubbed in the next few years than there ever has been before. And so we need to meet that challenge as vendors, as a set of vendors. And we can't, as you say, build a whole bunch of expensive studios to accommodate this expansion. So we need to look at clever ways to expand the capacity. And that is on, you know, even going back to the educational side and on training up more actors, directors, writers in a much more kind of a collaborative way, but also being able to, again, build that workforce in each territory to meet the challenge of more and more content that needs to be dubbed. And so, you know, it's our duty to build these tools to increase capacity. Otherwise,
absolutely,
we'll sit back and we'll just be swamped as a community.
There's no way to achieve the scalability that we need for existing vendors without doing this. And it's not just for the vendors, but for the artists. You know, like we said in you know, our voice actors now can do more jobs and make more money because they can do more jobs because they're not traveling. But it also opens us up to be able to use a wider talent pool. You know, we work with we did some recordings with Pokemon, and the director of some of those recordings was thrilled because they found some new voice talent that they weren't previously using because they were only casting outside of, you know, in Los Angeles. And this opened them up to be able to use actors that they really liked that were in Texas or Missouri or, you know, any other states. And same goes, you know, if you're in Spain, if you want to use an actor from Barcelona, but you're in Madrid, this opens up the door to do that. So scalability, as Maz said, is really, I think, the next iteration of this. And I think that COVID really brought remote dubbing to front and center. But scalability and the increase in the amount of work that we're going to have to do over the next few years is really what's going to keep it here and keep it going.
Speaking of increasing scalability, there is one last thing we can discuss is the agenda, as was mentioned in the agenda. However, we can discuss any other thing afterwards. So that is like an extra topic which helps with scalability in a way as well, and that is machine translation. Machine translation is working for subtitles somewhere it is, but we're talking about dubbing today mostly. So there was this trend on synthetic voices for advertisements, for marketing campaigns, for bigger organizations worldwide. And this is not, of course, in no way equal to the actual dubbing. It cannot be called machine dubbing, as Belén corrected me in the past. It's more like voiceover. And if we're talking in reproducing conversations or speeches of different, let's say, famous actors in many different languages, which they do not know, but the synthetic voices would do that for them. So with that, actually, there are already some interesting solutions and technologies on the market. Before I name them, I would like to know if anyone has had a similar experience with recording, like doing something with synthetic voices for voiceover in many different languages.
Yeah, we're definitely always researching what's available when it comes to synthetic voices. But we also have some clients that use synthetic voice for audio description, you know, which is a service for the visually impaired. That it's basically an audio track that accompanies the media, the content, and there's a voiceover describing what's happening on screen, so that people who are visually impaired can enjoy content with their families and so on and so forth. So we do have some clients that are using synthetic voices for audio description in different languages, and so it does exist, and it is being used today by some content providers, by some television networks, for audio description specifically. And when it comes to that, it's, you know, I think that there was some research done that with the visually impaired community around the world, and the outcome was, you know, yeah, we prefer real voices, but if the choice is synthetic voice or no audio description, we'd much prefer synthetic voice. And the quality of synthetic voices is really, it's getting more and more impressive. There are even tools out there. I've made a synthetic version of my voice, actually, using a tool that exists on the market, and hopefully somebody won't take that and take my voice and sell it for their own profits, but we'll see if that happens one day. But there's some really great tools out there. I don't think that it's at the quality that's ready to replace. It's definitely nowhere near the quality to replace dubbing. But even voiceover dubbing, lectern style dubbing, I don't think that it's there quite yet.
Yeah, mirror what you just said, Greg. Actually, I think it's again with the accessibility synthetic voice side. It's about cost, and I think a lot of broadcasters, a lot of content providers who are trying to build more accessibility into their media, it's really not cost effective for some of them. So they need to look at alternatives. And, you know, as Greg said, it's either you have it sometimes in a synthetic manner, or you don't have it at all. Obviously, the accessibility needs to be there as much as possible. And I think it's a solution. Dubbing, look, you know, it's still way up. I mean, you know, we don't really want to go down that route as yet, as certainly as a localization provider. And, you know, we've explored things very tentatively in this space, and we just don't see it being anywhere near sentience. There's no sentience, essentially. As soon as you have a sentient, you know, machine translation that can utterly replace a translation for a dubbing script, which is far different from a subtitling script, then you have an actor that is a sentient replacement that has all the context and all the passion of an acting performance. Well, then we're in trouble as an industry generally. Yeah, but it's so far.
I think we're in trouble as a humanity also.
Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't endorse it, and I'll be out of this as and when that comes to fruition. But yeah, it's a creative process, and we can't, you know, that's why people watch television and movies. They want to be, you know, they don't want to think, hang on, was that bit synthetic? No, but, you know, that just takes me out of my experience. We shouldn't really sort of compromise on that.
Yeah, the whole, you know, the whole point, and you know, we've talked about this, Belén and Yulia. One of the golden rules of localization is, well, keep the director's original intent, but also maintain suspension of disbelief. And the second that something happens in which, you know, oh, is that a synthetic voice? It pulls you out of the world that the director built, and that's really not great. For the purpose of conversation, though, and you know, I guess that this is a panel and we should be having some open conversation. I am curious, you know, in talking about audio description and the idea that, well, we'd rather have synthetic voice than nothing. I think it's interesting to explore the idea of lectern, you know, voiceover style dub in synthetic voice for emerging markets that don't currently offer dubbing. You know, for the many hundred, you know, the dozens or more than dozens of languages for which dubbing doesn't currently exist because of cost reasons. You know, I'm curious to know what everybody else thinks. Is this a good place to explore when it comes to offering dubbing to those territories? I don't know. I know it's not my job to ask questions, but it's an interesting thing that I just thought about.
I would agree. Definitely an option, and I think it's definitely going to be something that might be considered in emerging territories. For a localization businesses such as ours, it's really difficult to service emerging territories from a cost perspective, because we still have our costs to kind of accommodate. And if they're saying, well, this is not cost effective, it's just not, this is prohibitive to us getting this content to market, your localization cost, we're not about to take it on the chin, for that. But we do want to be able to service, more than just the traditional markets. We want to be able to expand. So we will, some of these kind of solutions to try and make that happen.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you could deliver, something that doesn't require literacy, that could maybe be achieved at the same price of a subtitle, or maybe slightly more than the price of a subtitle, in some of these markets that don't currently have dubbing. But it's something interesting to look out for, I think. I think also something, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that most of the voice synthesis that's done, I'm pretty sure that the money is concentrated on the most spoken languages and achieving high quality synthesized voice in those languages. So maybe we're a ways away from that as well, because I doubt that, that there's a lot of investment in synthesized voice for a language that only 200,000 people speak.
Also, you look at the tools that Deluxe has built, we've built, Iuno's built. They're assistive tools, so we're assisting the creative process rather than replacing it. So that's what we put all of our energy into. That's our primary kind of concern, is to actually assist the creative process, not to sort of damage it and throw it away.
Yeah, but I loved what Greg say. I think this is accessibility, because accessibility is not only accessibility for the deaf and hard of hearing, or for the people who are visually impaired, but it's also cultural accessibility and linguistic accessibility. And yeah, I think machine translation is also used in that sense to make content accessible to minorities, or to languages that are not so mainstreamed. And I would love to see how this could be used, even if it's academic research. Someone can lead, in a sense, if because money is as you said, is invested in mainstream languages. But I guess you can pilot a project and try to do that in, African languages or something like that. That'd be pretty cool. Thanks for the idea, Greg. I hope someone picks that up and builds a project around it.
Well, and everything is double-edged, Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Patented it. Is that your patent?
Oh, is that my patent? Which one?
What you just said in the last 10 minutes. I'm writing this down, by the way.
It is now. I've staked put the flag down, and claimed it. But it is, even with machine translation, which I don't personally think, Maz used the term an assistive tool. I think that's where we're at with machine translation. To be honest, it's great for things that are very straightforward, user manuals, legal documents, things like that, that where the translation is where the original content, there's no room for discussion as to what it means. But with creative content, and especially the way that we're using machine translation today, I don't think that I think that at best it can be a helper, so that translators don't have to type out when somebody says hello, or very basic terms. It's when it comes to the creative content, there's so much subtext that I think one of the problems with machine translation is it's just reading text. All of the subtext that people use to communicate with their eyes, and what they're doing with their face and their tone of voice, and all of these things really affect what somebody really is saying and what somebody means when they're saying. And you don't pick up on that when you're reading text. And as a result, machine translation is, if it's just pulling from text as a source, it's only going to be an assistive tool. And it will never replace translators unless you start bringing in those other layers of, tone analysis, face analysis, context analysis. All of these things really need to happen before it replaces a translator. And I don't see that happening, in the next few years at all.
I would agree.
Well, with that optimistic note, I think we can conclude our today's panel discussion. I would have some controversial comments to the machine translation part, but again, this is not the question for today's discussion. But I would like to offer you, gentlemen, and Belén, and whoever is watching this actually, to follow our Nimdzi language technology series, because further into the 2021, if we ever get there. So if we get there, then there will be more of such discussions, and definitely there will be something on what's happening with machine translation, and specifically in appliance to the creative content, which Greg just mentioned. So please stay tuned, and thank you very much for your contribution, for your time, for your attention. And let's stay in touch. This is amazing industry and amazing technology we have just discussed.
Thank you very much.
Really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting us. Great to see everybody.
Thank you.